All right. Hi, guys. My name is Jennifer Ashiru, and I'm an associate games producer at Cartoon Network Games. So, at Cartoon Network, we primarily work on the publishing side with third party indie developers. So, we work with team sizes from anywhere from 1 to 10 plus. And a lot of times when we're getting game pitches, we find that the game pitches, the ideas are huge, they're really big. And that in turn leads to a really big scope and can be a little difficult or present challenges when managing the game. So, how do we manage our scope? And yeah, so I set this up in do's and don'ts. So, we're going to go over some do's and don'ts for scoping your game ideas for small teams. So, the first do is do have a game plan. And you want to break this down for your project, your team, and your assets and your features. So, in terms of your project, it's a very good idea to outline your game design document. Your game design document is the foundation piece for what is your game. It is the basis of your game. It also outlines the goal and the vision of your game. So, why are you making the game and who is this game for? It also details all major components of the game. So anything from UI, art, engineering standards, music, etc. So at Cartoon, we also put together what we like to call a scope document. And the scope document, it quantifies every feature and asset in your game. So this can be anything from like, how many characters do you have? How many skins do those characters have? How many animation sets do those characters also have? And you want to break this down for every major feature and asset in game. So this also includes like environments, bosses, etc. So with scope, it gives you a realistic look into the size of your game, and it makes scaling your game more flexible so that you can look back and see, where can we cut down on, certain items like characters or bosses. Additionally, at Cartoon, we also like to put together a milestone document, and this is your delivery schedule. It sets up your dates and also the stages of the game of your game. So at Cartoon, we have 5 major stages, and those are prototype, vertical slice, alpha, beta, and gold. And milestones are often a couple of months, like they're often weeks to a couple of months out from each other. So it can be a little overwhelming when you're working towards like, a major milestone delivery date. So when you're in a small team, I really suggest setting up sprint schedules or sprint cycles. It makes working towards your milestone much more manageable. And sprints can last anywhere from like a day, a couple of days, and they can also be weekly. So. Also, do have a game plan for your team. You want to assess who's working on what. So who's working on art, who's working on music, UI, UX. And then when you're also in your smaller teams, like some of you may wear multiple hats. So this also is a good time to outline, your workload basically to see like, if it's manageable for your team members. In that, it's also really good to set up a pipeline for your team. So your pipeline kind of also lets you determine like how long things will flow through your team. So, for example, if you're an artist and you're working on characters design, and you may also do the animation for the art for the character. And once you finish, the character design and the animation, you'll send it to the programmer, and the programmer may implement it in game, and then the programmer may implement it in a build and send it to the producer for review or feedback. And then the producer may send feedback back to the programmer or artist. So it's really good to have a good pipeline flow for your team just to see how assets and features and components like flow through and how long it'll take. When you're also determining your game plan for your team, this is a good time to ask yourself, like, do you need to bring on additional help, any contractors or extra help? So if you're an artist and you're working, you're also doing UI and animation, and it may be a really good time to bring someone else on to help you with those additional features if you find that your workload is overwhelming. So do have a game plan for your assets and your features as well. So it's really good to list all assets in games and then also the stages of where each asset is in game. So, for example, if we're making a Steven Universe game and we list out all the characters and then we list out the stages from concept to animation, the first set of animations, you may highlight where each asset or which where each stage of the asset is in game. So green being that it's complete, yellow being that it's in progress, and white being that it hasn't been started yet. This is really good because it lets you also realize, like, you may like notice other assets and features that you didn't even think of, so that, these characters may need additional animation, FX. It'll give you a realistic look into what all is left in your game and what you have to look forward to. So don't let feature creep stop you from being great. So what is feature creep? So feature creep is basically the ongoing expansion of ideas or any new features and ideas that come along. And so, sorry. So when does feature creep occur? So feature creep can occur at any stage in game. So it can occur from as early as concept to as late as gold. So how do you manage feature creep? So you manage feature creep by listing out any additional, like any new features or any new ideas that may come up. It's really good to put these in a wish list and then list out the specifications for each of these items, like what it would require to implement it, and then how will it affect other features and components in game. Yeah. So this brings me to our next do. Our next do is focus on the core loop of the game. So what is the core loop? The core loop is the foundation of your game design, and it essentially focuses on your player's basic actions. It's the repetitive loop of like what you're doing. So essentially, like, your player may run, jump, and shoot. But you want those to feel really good, so it's always good to like refine your core loop. So an example is, let's say we're developing an RPG Lite. Your core loop here may be enter a room, attack enemies, do some puzzling, and then collect rewards. Another example is, let's say we're developing an arcade soccer game. And this one is actually based off of a game that I've done. And our core loop here was run, dribble, tackle, pass, switch, and shoot. And this one is interesting because when we first started this game, our core loop was really kind of boring. Like, it was essentially just, run down the field, shoot the ball in the goal, and that was it. So we decided to add an additional mechanic to run, and that was the sprint. So as you're running, you can also, sprint with a cooldown, and it made the game feel more fun. And then with the dribbling and tackling, it originally felt a little boring again. So we decided to add, like a little obstacles, so the characters would like come up to you and you felt like you had to defend yourself, so you weren't just running straight through them and then just getting to the goal. So don't be afraid to remove the unnecessary. So I like to say reduce, reuse, rework, and remove. An example here is I worked on a game where we had a checkpoint statue, and we were already saving the game anytime you entered a room or anytime you completed a puzzle. So actually going to the checkpoint statue just seemed kind of like an extra step for the player. So we decided to remove it. But then we came up into an issue where we needed to make new activation points for our game. And these would kind of be like our little beacons. And we needed to make new assets for them. And that was going to take way too much time. So I sat down with the artist and we kind of discussed and just, we took the original checkpoint statue and reworked it to be our new activation or beacon point. So do reevaluate scope at every milestone. So this one is kind of self-explanatory, but anytime you come up on a major milestone, it's always a good, time to do a bunch of testing and always get outside opinions, because you may find that some things just aren't working. Like, you may have more characters than you need, more bosses than you need, more assets than you need. But so an example is I worked on a web game where we had 12 bosses planned from concept, and I was working with a team of one. So, and this one guy was doing art, animation, programming, everything. And it just became really mismanageable. So we took a look at the scope, and we had basically 2 bosses for every ninja in game, and there were 6 ninjas. So we took a look at it, and we decided that his boss designs were just like really complicated and really complex. So we, sorry, so we cut that down to six bosses, and the game just ended up feeling much better. You had six ninjas, and then one boss per ninja, and the game just felt really meaty and really good. So that was a good time for us to really reevaluate scope, after we did some testing on that milestone. So don't get hung up on one feature, asset, item, etc. So this is really easy to do. It's really easy to just get caught up on one thing because you just want to get it feeling just like really right. But there's just like there's so much of like other things to do in your game. So if you're getting caught up on something like the color of a character's coat, you want to assess like, is that worth your time, and is it important? Do you need to be working, is the character actually functioning in game? So it's really good to prioritize, prioritize your list, like, of what you need to do. So if you find you're getting caught up on one feature or asset or something like that, ask yourself, what is it? How much time have you spent on it, or how much time do you need to spend on it in order to, implement it? And is it worth your time? And then also assess how important it is. So a bonus do. So do have fun. So you guys are all game makers and game changers. Like, that's what we do. We all make games, and it's really easy to lose focus in sight of like why, you're making games. But let your passion fuel your game. Like, be a light to your team. Like working, like when your scope gets really big, it's really easy to get overwhelmed. But it's just a good idea to just remember, like I said, why you're making games. So quick recap. So do have a game plan. Don't let feature creep stop you from being great. Do focus on the core loop of the game. Don't be afraid to remove the unnecessary. Do reevaluate scope at every milestone. Don't get hung up on one feature, asset, item, etc. And do have fun. Thank you.